Everyone believed the billionaire's daughter had been born completely blind. Doctors confirmed it, the newspapers whispered about it, and her father carried the weight of that diagnosis like a lifelong curse. For 11 years, no one questioned it. Not the staff, not the tutors, not even David Cole himself, the man who had built an agricultural empire and yet could not give his only child the simple gift of sight. His daughter, Lily, lived in silence, tucked away inside a mansion on the Connecticut coast that looked dazzling from the outside but felt cold and lifeless within. The house itself was a fortress of marble and glass, perched on cliffs above the water. To outsiders, it was a palace. But for David, it was a tomb of memories. His wife, Emily, had died in a helicopter crash just days after Lily's birth, and from that moment, he had sealed himself off from the world. He stopped attending galas, refused business dinners, and pulled his daughter far from public view. Each morning, he guided her through the long, echoing hallways, her tiny hand clutching his. She rarely spoke, rarely laughed, and her cloudy gray eyes seemed to stare into nothingness. The specialists all said the same thing: she will never see. David accepted their words as gospel, and yet, every time he looked at her, his heart begged for a different truth. Years passed in silence. Lily spent her days near the same wide window, clutching an old teddy bear and tilting her head toward the faintest breeze. She never asked questions, never pointed at colors, never reacted the way other children did. David tried everything: music, scents, stories, but she seemed locked in a world he could not enter. At night, when the mansion was quiet, he would whisper apologies to her, blaming himself for everything. His empire meant nothing to him anymore. He had wealth, but no joy. Then came Julia Harper. At 27, she carried her own scars. Just months earlier, she had lost her newborn daughter. The grief hollowed her out. Alone in a small New Jersey apartment, she answered an ad for a housekeeping position at the Cole mansion. She wasn't chasing opportunity, she was escaping pain. When she arrived, David noticed her quiet strength immediately. She wasn't intimidated by the silence of the house, and when she met Lily, she didn't flinch or pity her. Julia simply sat nearby, folding laundry or polishing glass, moving with a gentleness that seemed to say, "I see you, even if no one else does." Lily noticed too. At first, it was just the tilt of her head when Julia entered a room. Then a hum, soft and uncertain, when Julia was close. One afternoon, as Julia folded linens in the hallway, Lily crawled toward her, tiny hands brushing against the wall for guidance. Julia froze, then extended her own hand silently. Lily's fingers touched hers, tentative at first, then steady. That moment, though brief, felt like the start of something that had been waiting years to happen. Julia began to notice details others had ignored. Once, she dropped a cloth and Lily flinched. Another time, when Julia walked quietly across a rug, Lily's head turned before Julia even spoke. These weren't random reflexes. They were precise reactions. And then came the moment that would shake Julia to her core. She had been dusting Lily's room when her phone flashlight accidentally flicked on. The narrow beam of light passed across the child's face. For a second, Julia thought she imagined it, but no. Lily's eyelids twitched. Her pupils shifted ever so slightly, as though trying to follow the glow. Julia's heart pounded. Could it be possible? She tested again the next day, waving the light gently back and forth. Once more, Lily's eyes flickered. It wasn't strong, but it was real. The girl who had been declared blind from birth could see something. Julia's suspicion deepened when she discovered a wooden box in the bathroom cabinet. Inside were rows of prescription eye drop bottles, all from the same doctor, Dr. Atticus Monroe. The labels carried chemical names Julia didn't recognize, so she discreetly searched them. What she found made her stomach drop: compounds that, in high doses, could suppress light response and cause temporary blindness, especially in children. Why had Lily been taking these for years? Julia wrestled with the truth. Should she tell David? Should she risk his anger? Her heart said yes, but her mind warned her to wait. So one evening, she sat across from Lily on the rug, flashlight in hand. "Lily," she whispered, "if you feel something, let me know." She clicked it on. Lily blinked, then blinked again, faster this time. And then, in a voice barely above a breath, she said, "I think I saw a light." "Mommy." Julia broke down. It wasn't just that Lily had reacted, it was the word, mommy. Julia had buried her own child not long ago, and now this fragile girl was reaching out with the only word she had for comfort. Tears blurred Julia's eyes as she pulled Lily into her arms. At that moment, she knew her role was no longer just cleaning the mansion. It was protecting this child. But the secret didn't last. A few days later, David walked in and caught Julia mid-test with the flashlight. His voice thundered, "What are you doing with my daughter?" Before Julia could explain, Lily stood, walked across the room, something she had never done with such certainty, and wrapped her arms around Julia's waist. Trembling, she whispered again, "I saw a light." David froze. He had lived 11 years believing his daughter was lost to darkness. Now she was speaking, moving, clinging to a maid as though her life depended on it. His knees almost gave out. With a choked voice, he said, "Stop the drops. Tonight." What followed was nothing short of miraculous. Within days of stopping the medication, Lily began turning her face toward the morning sun. Within weeks, she pointed clumsily at shapes on flashcards. One afternoon, Julia showed her a yellow toy duck, and Lily smiled for the first time in her life. "Duck," she whispered, and David wept like a child. The mansion, once silent as a grave, was filling with laughter. Julia smuggled one of the bottles to an old friend from nursing school, now a resident in ophthalmology. The lab confirmed her worst fears. The drops contained dangerously high doses of cyclopentolate, a compound once tied to unapproved pharmaceutical trials. In short, Lily's blindness wasn't a birth defect. It had been manufactured. Dr. Atticus Monroe had stolen her sight. The truth ignited a storm. Richard's legal team uncovered lawsuits against Monroe that had been quietly settled. Other families came forward, their children harmed in similar ways. Soon, the story hit national news. Billionaire's daughter never blind, poisoned by doctor's drops. The nation was outraged. Monroe was hunted down, arrested, and dragged to trial. Through the chaos, Lily bloomed. With therapy, she began recognizing colors. Her favorite was yellow, because it feels like happiness, she told Julia. She started drawing with crayons, shaky lines at first, then bold strokes. David turned one of the mansion's unused rooms into an art studio. Julia taped Lily's first drawing, a bright swirl of yellow and blue, to the kitchen wall. For the first time in over a decade, the Cole mansion felt like a home. The trial dragged on, but justice eventually came. Monroe was convicted of illegal medical practices and sentenced to prison. Pharmaceutical companies tied to his trials were fined and banned from further experiments. David testified, admitting his blind trust. Julia testified too, explaining how she had uncovered the truth. The courtrooms listened, but the real proof wasn't in their words. It was in Lily's smile, in her laughter, in the colors she now saw with her own eyes. Years later, Lily stood on stage at a Children's Foundation ceremony in New York City, wearing her favorite yellow dress. She had just been awarded a medal for courage. The crowd applauded as she clutched Julia's hand. Then, in her speech, Lily said, "People always ask me when I saw light for the first time. They expect me to say a flashlight or the sun. But the truth is, the first light I ever saw wasn't with my eyes. It was with my heart. And it came from her." She pointed at Julia. The audience rose in thunderous applause. David, standing in the front row, wiped away tears. Julia, now Lily's adoptive mother, couldn't speak, only smile through the flood of emotions. Lily, once the silent girl trapped in darkness, had become an artist, a daughter, and a survivor. And it all began the day Julia Harper refused to look away.